Okay, we are back. 2022 real estate market forecast. I am so excited. I have been trying to get somebody from Orange Coast Title back in our studio for a little bit now. We've got Mike Marconi, the COO of the Orange Coast Title family of companies, which is pretty much, you have businesses throughout the country, correct?
We do, with heavy concentration in the western states.
Okay, all right, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Let me kind of get my introduction and some of the disclosures out of the way. So again, I'm super excited that Mike is here with us today. If you guys recall, many years ago, I think it was maybe 4 years ago, we had Rich Macaluso on stage with the panel, and Rich did a great job, but we just haven't quite been able to connect. And then as I was reaching out to the OCT guys, and actually Rich, he says, no, you need to get Mike in here. And I thought, you know what, you're right. Mike's the guy we needed to have here all along. So anyway,
Thank you.
Super excited to have you join our forecast this year. Hopefully this is an enjoyable experience, and we'll have you back every year and we'll get some updates. So before we start though, just a little disclosure. Broker owner, Coldwell Banker Town and Country, and our family of companies. But at the Coldwell Banker side, we do have a partnership with Orange Coast Title of Southern California. We've been kind of dancing with you guys now for a few years. So just so yeah. So it's been a good thing. So anyway, we'll get that stuff out of the way. So anyway, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
First year to our forecast.
Yeah,
so,
I'm looking forward to being here and having a chance to chat with you.
Yeah, excellent. So since it is your first year, just to kind of set the stage, we do our forecasts it used to truly just be a forecast. We would bring the economists in. The economists would attempt to give us some sort of idea of what they thought was going to happen next year and in the future. Of course, with always a look back, because that's how economists are. They spend an hour telling you what happened,
right,
and then 3 minutes telling you, oh, well, based upon that, this is what we think is going to happen. So we do the formal forecast, but a few years ago, actually, I think it was the first year that I had Rich come in, we said, we're going to do two pieces of our forecasts. We're going to do the forecast, and then we're going to have the industry people come in. Basically, anybody who's in the real estate business industry, real estate, escrow. We've never actually had an escrow company come in, although I know you guys do that as well. But escrow, title, mortgage, anybody who's the industry guy. And then if they're brave and they want to say, well, based upon our research, this is what we think is going to happen. So that's great. So we'll leave that open. So if you want to give us some wisdom of what you think is going to happen this year, or what the people that you guys are trusting, because I'm assuming you're talking to some people that are, kind of guiding what you think may happen. But anyway, so welcome. So I'm glad you're here. So let's start. We've done, you're, I think, our 7th interview in this year's forecast. We have 7 or 8 more.
Wow.
And we've been the first 6 or 7 that we've done. We've always started the same way. So I'm going to give you the same treatment. We've taken a look back. So here we are, March of 2022. Literally 2 years ago, almost 2 years to the week, right? We're in crazy COVID, lockdowns, unprecedented, everybody's freaking out a little bit. We certainly were. So I'd like to, maybe do like a 2-year look back. What were you guys thinking 2 years ago when we first started entering COVID? And I know the answer to at least a couple of these questions. What kind of year did you have in 2020 business-wise? 2021, and then we'll kind of bring it up to speed. So how have the last 2 years been for OCT?
Well, that's an interesting question, because they have been fantastic and challenging and scary, all sort of rolled up into one.
Yep.
As you mentioned, we're here at 2 years, and at first, mostly everybody was afraid just for their health and their well-being, and just exactly what was this all going to be. I remember at the particular time when the lockdown started to happen, I was the one of our executive team that was in the offices. And, for a good part of the next 3 days, you're worried about, what do I need to do to have there be safety amongst everyone? What does it look like in our company? Is it gonna, is this gonna survive, or what's gonna take place? We were fortunate to find out fairly early that we were branded as an essential business,
right?
Because we were, as the title insurance, we were under the financial services.
Under the financial side, and as believe it or not, as were real estate agents. I'm not sure we were as essential as you guys were on the financial side, but that happened very early. Almost immediately.
I remember the first 2 or 3 days post us finding out about our standing, there was some guidance at CAR that was talking about you folks were not. And,
Correct.
And that then there was a lot of legal work, and,
Right.
and we actually put together a call amongst as many partners as we could.
Yep, I think I was on that call.
You
this
were.
This was March or
it was
or
pretty
late
early in
March,
March,
early April of
2020. Yes.
Yeah.
And the general conversation was to say that we believed you should be essential within the same financial services designation, and looked for the lobbying, if you will, to the legislature to get that status. And so once that happened, then we go through phases, because you started to have, as COVID, we transferred through the rest of the year, you started to find high demand for housing.
Right.
And you had unbelievable interest rates. And so you had high demand for housing, and then as it kind of wore on throughout the year, you had record-breaking transaction count,
Right.
and creating just this amazing demand. So
Right.
2020 was amazing in terms of its lows and highs.
Right.
That carried into 2021. And so we, as a matter of fact, typically our industry is pretty seasonal, and the first quarter, because there's a lot of time off in December, the first quarter usually takes a while before we get started. But 2021's first quarter was one of the most robust that we can remember.
Well, and wasn't that partially because the fourth quarter of 2020 was so robust?
Yes.
And that's not, I mean, I don't want to, I mean, our businesses are so closely connected. I mean, if I'm doing well in real estate, obviously real estate transactions require title. You guys also have other legs, you know, whether it's refis or whatever. But on the residential real estate side, the fourth quarter of 2020 was like no other fourth quarter I've ever had. And again, with all of the panic and all of the health concerns, people were still out buying houses, which meant the first quarter of 2020 was just taken off.
Yes.
So obviously that's what you experienced immediately in 2021.
Yes, the first quarter of 2021 was record in terms of transaction count.
Yep.
We started hearing from you folks in the real estate community at the end of 2020 about issues with inventory and all of that, but yet demand was so high, really the analysis of inventory might have been a little faulty because transaction count was up at record paces. So then as we kind of progressed through 2021 with this high demand and this heavy transaction count, you had a situation where we were starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about COVID and as a whole. Maybe lockdowns were starting to ease a bit. Now I'm talking about kind of October, early November, and some planning, if you will, from our customers in the real estate community that and ourselves too, that maybe we might want to do a vacation, maybe you might want to see your families over the holidays. So transaction counts started to become a little bit more typical, cyclical.
And you're talking, just for clarity, the fourth quarter of 2021, basically
fourth quarter
4 or 5,
2021.
6 months ago. Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So I started to rationalize that from information that I was getting from just talking to people in the marketplace and talking to my managers in my other divisions. So I started to rationalize that, and then unfortunately you had a little bit of a double whammy because you had COVID scare all over again.
Yep. We had the Omni. I was going to say Delta. We had Omicron or Omicron.
Right.
Yep.
So that made for a pretty interesting December because you had people that had their plans, you had typical holiday situation, and then you had some concerns over a situation with a rise in COVID. Still good marketplace, still good transaction count, but made for December and January to be a little bit more light, a little bit more normal.
Almost normal.
Almost normal.
Yeah.
Good point. And so now what we're finding is that January has been better than December, February has been better than January, and March so far has been better than February in terms of the way that the count is going. Little effects going on also with interest rates.
Yep.
They're rising a bit, and so obviously it impacts the side of our business where we do refinance transactions. Starting to have a little bit of impact on sales, I think. Because what you're finding is with all of this record-breaking volume, prices keep rising, and although they appear to be leveling. And so you have some affordability issues going on. I think maybe a little bit of trouble with appraisals. And then I'm finding out now with that slight tick up of inventory is maybe your younger or entry buyer might be a little bit stymied by how sellers want the all cash deal or or whatever that is. So, little squeeze at the moment on some segment of the of the buying populace.
Right. You know, I've been doing business with your company for a long time, 30 plus years. Our partnership just started, I don't know, however long. It seemed like maybe 5 or 6 years ago where we actually started to partner up on some stuff. But your title reps have been in my office forever. And I will, if Gloria was sitting here, or if Annette was sitting here, or previously if Susie was sitting here, they would tell you, every sales meeting, darn near every sales meeting, I would say, how's business? I don't want to hear the sugar-coated stuff. Our orders up, down, flat. And I'd ask the same thing of the lenders. Up, this is pre-COVID, during COVID, you know, today. Because I wanted to see, because in theory, all of our businesses should be tracking. Now, again, I don't do the refis and the mortgage, so when you start to look at rising interest rates, which, by the way, let's do a timeout on my Gloria and Annette conversation. Can you share what percentage of your guys' business has been or refi driven? Is that a big chunk of what you guys have been doing? I got to think it can't be small.
We do quite a bit of refis, but we've made a strategic decision some time ago where we have a full-fledged lender division that focuses on that.
Yep.
And we like to really channel our resale divisions into resale business as much as possible, and have the only refi business be because of relationships, if you will, that are maybe a lender that you might have referred to us, or that type of thing. And so that way it keeps our impact lessened from the standpoint of refis. But it definitely was there, and it's, you know, it's off anywhere, depending upon where you look, 25% at the particular moment, and so it's definitely been a revenue impact.
Yep. Well, I've got Brett Reichel with Loan Depot is going to be coming in right after I'm done with Mike, and we already interviewed Randy Johnson with Planet Home Lending, and we had the refi conversation, and I'm going to have the refi conversation with Brett, and I mean, it kind of makes common sense. Rates are rising. You know, that refi market's going to be a little different.
Yep.
But I get concerned as somebody who's not in the loan business, that when a consumer hears that ABC Mortgage Company is laying off X amount of loan officers, the message or the narrative associated with that might be, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with the real estate market. I'm like, well, no, but there's definitely going to be some adjustments that are going to be made if you're in the lending side, or again, maybe you've already made the adjustments in the title side, if a good percent of your revenue is based upon refis. So just to set the stage, today is March 22nd. 60 days or so, I'm going to be off by a little bit, but 60 days or so ago, you could have got a nice 30-year fixed purchase or refi in the low threes, depending upon, you know, how aggressive the lender would have been, maybe even sub 3. Certainly could have got a sub 3% mortgage rate fourth quarter of last year. Okay, today, a lot of stuff going on. I mean, oh my gosh, the Fed's out. They had their 2-day meeting last week. Did a 0.25% basis point in the Fed funds rate last increase, I think last week. Made an announcement that they're scheduling 6 Fed funds rate increases pretty much at every meeting this year, which basically takes us to what, like a 1.5% Fed funds rate?
Right.
But most lenders would say, hey, we've already got that baked in. But anyway, but today, I mean, geez, I think if you wanted to lock in a mortgage rate today, you're going to be looking north of 4.5. I think I got somebody this morning said, yeah, it's 4 5/8 as of this morning. Now, who knows? 6 hours later, could be a quarter point less.
Right.
Could be a quarter point more. But we're not used to that.
No.
Real estate agents are not used to that. Consumers are not used to that.
I think that's the point. Is like you said, is just how are the consumers going to view it?
Correct.
Because you've got that publicity around what you said earlier about potential changes in some of the institutional refi type shops.
Yep.
But there's the publicity around that, and then a rate that they're not used to.
Right.
I've started to hear a little bit of conversation around different types of loans so that they could bring in the 15 years and things that start to lower that rate down into what they think the consumer will go for a bit.
Right. Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting. The narrative is everything. As a matter of fact, again, I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks, where our finale for our real estate market forecast is April 6th, so we're about 2 weeks out. Chris Thornburg has been our keynote economist with Beacon Economics and the UCR School of Economic Forecasting and Development at UCR. And he's going to be coming on April 6th. He's going to kind of do our actual forecast, you know, with our economic side. But I've been kind of, you know, cheating a little bit. I've been watching what he's been doing on some other forecasts. And he's inserted a new term into his forecast, and it's basically, what is the narrative? What is the narrative out there, whether it's in the media or whether it's coming from real estate industry folks or, frankly, people at the barbecue on a weekend?
Right.
And is the narrative, oh, we're in a bubble, and that narrative's been out there for forever. Or we're in a rising interest rate environment, or affordability, or last week, we had, for the first time this year, one of our speakers talked about buyer fatigue. You kind of touched on that. That buyer says, gosh, I can't compete unless I'm all cash or large down payment. God forbid I'm an FHA buyer. I mean, goodness gracious, those good quality buyers, I mean, they just have such a hard time. So my concern is the narrative that's kind of being placed in front of the consumers. And then just to bring it back to kind of the interest rate thing we were just talking about, is if the narrative is a 4.5% interest rate is bad, which I've been doing this for a long time, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say that that's bad.
But I think it might. Some people are thinking that,
right?
Especially if they don't have a lot of experience in the business. But again, I've said to my agents and my buyers and anybody who's listening right now, if you can get a 4.5% interest rate, buy the house. If you can get the house you want at whatever price at a 4.5% interest rate, buy it. That would have been nicer to buy that house at a 3% interest rate, of course,
sure.
but still buy it. But it'll be interesting to see what sort of pressure that puts on our marketplace. We talked about refis a little bit. You mentioned inventory, and I want to expand on that a little bit. The inventory levels have been low, and we've been complaining about that. But if you look at the unit sales over the last couple of years, we're complaining about inventory, but we're selling more houses. Right. So it's like, so I don't really think the problem for the last few years has been inventory. It's just been the demand has been so high, it's always made the inventory look low.
Right.
Because it just gobbled up immediately.
You're singing the song that I was singing to my salespeople in terms of what is my view of inventory at this point.
Right. So you're basically saying there is inventory out there. Go capture your market share.
Correct.
Go get it, right? Because that's what you got to do to our salespeople.
Correct.
Go get your piece. Don't say, hey, there's nothing to sell, because there has been stuff to sell. But the inventory is still rough. I mean, we are, for March of 2022, this is the lowest level of inventory in March of 2022 historically. I mean, I don't know how far back we got to go, but I have charts going back for 10, 15 years, and I can compare inventory levels in March of 22 at least for 15 years, and it's the smallest bar chart that I have.
That you've ever seen, yeah.
So it's challenging, but this is the deal. The demand is still ridiculous. So if we end up with 20 offers on a house instead of 40 offers on a house, so what does that mean?
I think that was on my mind a little bit when you were talking about the impact and the narrative, right? One of the things that seems to me that could be troublesome would be that number of offers on a house, which continues to drive prices radically higher. Whereas if that calms down a little bit, I mean, like you said, there's still 10, 15 offers on houses at this point, from what I'm hearing from talking to people on your side of the transaction.
Still today. It's happening right now. So any concerns that we may think the consumer has, well, there's still a lot of consumers out there that say, I'm ready to buy at a 4.5% interest rate. A lot of demand. So what did you just say? Price is radically higher? Did I quote you correctly?
I think that's what I said, yes.
You said that 30 seconds ago.
Yes.
So, okay, so let's talk about that. So we've, generally speaking, and I know you have businesses all over the country, but let's just kind of stick with inland Southern California or Southern California. 20% appreciation in 2020, first year of COVID. 20% appreciation generally last year, 2022, residential real estate prices. Frankly, I'm hearing from people I trust that it's going to be double digit appreciation in 2022, even with rising interest rates. But California Association of Realtors came out a couple months ago. I don't know if they've modified the forecast, but their new forecaster, Jordan, his last name is escaping me, but Jordan with CAR, the new forecaster economist at California Association of Realtors, basically said a 5% increase in prices. So single family residential price appreciation, 5%, but 5% fewer unit sales is what he's projecting for the state in 2022. So do you have a gut feeling of is Jordan correct? Do you feel that? Do you have other data? Are you preparing for more, less, same?
I mean, I would certainly not say that I was an expert that would go against what it was that people are forecasting. I think a lot of what you're going to see is it's going to be different in different regions.
Yep.
And I do think that it seems as if the high end still is moving fast with multiple offers, and so I think that will continue to happen. I think there's lots of demand for entry-level housing, and that's still going to be strong. So it's that middle, depending upon the market that you're in, I think that's most affected.
Right.
So I think that that's probably about right. Forecasts that I see tend to be a little bit about momentum. 6 months ago, everybody was forecasting this year to be double digits, as you had mentioned before. When some caution things start happening, we had some inflation in our world, some uncertainty in our world, and so you started to get a little bit of conversation around maybe that's going to be deflated a little bit, right? And so now you're hearing more and more of that. So I think that's the narrative, to use your word. And a narrative can also make it happen if that's what the consumer believes.
Right.
So I would think that the forecast is probably right. I think that then it becomes around every part in the industry having to figure out, are we going to go out and get more of our share of the pie, if you will. I mean, one of the things we had a conversation within our own organization as salespeople in our own organization is not to get deceived by the amount of your income, because it's commission-based, right? And so if prices are rising, then the money in your pocket from a commission perspective can feel the same, but yet units can be going down, like you talked about. And so we try to use that as our own barometer to say, okay, let's not sit to where things change and we don't like it. Let's get back on the market share hunt, if you will.
Right. Well, you mentioned market share. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a sales guy. I'm certainly not an economist. I own and operate businesses, but I'm a sales guy.
Right.
And I have 200 plus agents, and you have a sales team. And at the end of the day, let's suppose we do have fewer unit sales. Well, then our job is to go out and capture more market share, and so that at the end of the year, those guys over there had a few more unit sales, but we beat the market.
Right.
Which is interesting. I mean, do you guys do anything with new home construction? Do you have anything going on with that?
Yes, we do. We have a division in our organization. It's our Builder Services Commercial Division. We have several relationships with builders. We have some that are sizable and others that are people that might be doing 10, 15, 25 lot properties, and even some spec building. So we have a division that does that. Frankly, there still is land acquisition happening in transactions that we're getting of that nature. So you still have the builders bullish on building.
Right.
They had their issues with lumber for a while.
Well, I think they still have a little bit of that.
Yep.
So, but with your relation, are you seeing those relationships saying, hey, yes, we're still bullish, and we're planning on continuing our building and our projects for the foreseeable future? Any insight on what they're doing?
What I find somewhat intriguing is a couple to 3 years ago, a lot of the builders were keying themselves around apartment-oriented construction.
Yep.
COVID has been very interesting in terms of how it's affected people's mindset about single-family-oriented home ownership.
Yep.
And even especially in the millennials, where they were the ones that were more interested in the apartment-type living.
Yep.
But now you've got a lot more activity from them looking for single-family homes too, from a safety perspective. So I think that's brought, from a builder perspective, that's brought focus back into single family.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing some good life there.
Yeah, we may stumble. Maybe we'll do it right now. Do you have it? I mean, we stumbled on builders building multifamily apartment buildings. Do you have any thoughts on the rental market? I wasn't even going to bring it up, but I mean, some of our other speakers, we've been spending a significant amount of time not only talking about home appreciation, but the rental appreciation, and I mean, it's nuts. And any thoughts on that? If not, we'll just move right past it.
Maybe a couple of comments. I got a professional and a personal comment with respect to that. I mean, I think they intertwine with each other. I've got a stepson and his significant other that are looking to try to decide, do we rent or do we buy?
Right.
And early on in their conversations, it was, let's rent.
Right.
And yet the appreciation has been so rapid, and it's actually even the rents are variable. I mean, like during the time of the year, it can vary a couple $300 a month, and that's significant for somebody trying to get into their first place.
Right.
So that's put some of the new construction that's coming out there in certain areas more into play for them.
Right.
So there's
on a purchase.
on a purchase basis.
Right. Okay.
So I think there's getting to be a bit of a point where the rental market is escalated so rapidly that it might be pushing people toward the purchase thought process that wasn't going to happen
Well, we've had
before.
no conversation about this topic before, and zero.
No.
And I wasn't even going to bring it up because I don't know if it's in Mike's wheelhouse. But what you just said is exactly what we've been talking about in previous speakers. Is that story of whether they're millennial or whatever age they are, saying, hey, I think the rental market is where I need to be for whatever reason.
Right.
And now they're out there saying, my gosh, do I really want to spend $3,200 for this, or something that I used to spend $2,500 a month for is now $3,500 a month on the rental. So does that now refocus them and say, well, geez, maybe we should buy a house with low interest rates, even at 4.5%,
right.
assuming they hold at that 4.5% number. So I think that those inflated rental values actually bolster the buying side of our transaction, and may actually put a little support level under what are some pretty higher prices that we've seen over the last couple of years. So interesting. I want to go back to the builders though.
Yep.
So one of the things that we've been talking about is we've not been building enough houses in, let's just stick with Southern California, which is what I know, but pretty much in the country for a long, long time. And we're just not building enough just to keep up with just general population growth. California Association of Realtors economist Joel Singer and others have been saying that I've been going to those meetings for 30 years. And I can remember 30 years ago them saying, we're just not building enough homes in California. I paid no attention to that. I mean, I did, and I acknowledge it to be true, but okay, I mean, it is what it is. Man, I am hyper-focused on that now, and meaning that we have not been building. It gets back to the inventory level. And then you take a look at all of the new construction, not all, I'm exaggerating, but a significant part has been on multifamily rentals. And very little has been on single-family homes, to residential living. But that's not a quick fix. I mean, they've been talking about it for years. Chris Thornburg will come in and he'll talk about it. But even if everybody tomorrow said, okay, great, we're going to start building more single-family homes for sale, it's going to take us a long time to get back there. But you're going to air, okay, I've got to get a little, well, I'm out of order here a little bit. Your video is going to air next week.
Okay.
Between today and the time we air your video, Ido Benzivi, if that name sounds familiar with, he is a big, large-scale developer, East End Moreno Valley. He has, actually he's all over the place, but my familiarity with him is East End Moreno Valley. And he's more of a commercial guy. He's building all of these logistic warehouses to store Amazon
As you see
stuff.
as you're driving out the 60.
Exactly,
Yeah.
That's him. At least a big chunk of that is him. Well, I've been asking Ido for 10 years. He also owns a huge number of residential buildable lots right in the center of Moreno Valley.
Okay.
Thousands.
Okay.
Thousands. They were graded and ready to be built in 2005, 2006. So go back.
It goes back a ways.
Well, and he said,
Pre-bubble.
time out. Well, yeah, but just enough of the bubble that he said, I'm stopping.
Right.
And he stopped before
Right.
he got slaughtered. So I've been asking him for 10, 11 years. So, at what point actually I didn't ask him in 2007 and 8 and 9 and 10 because it was obvious he's
Right.
not touching that. Nobody is. But I've been asking him for 10 years, at what point do you start building? I interviewed him last week. That interview is going to air before your interview airs. He's building 5,000 to 10,000 residential lots in Moreno Valley. He's grading this year, going to go vertical next year. Now, probably half of those will be multifamily rentals. They are what they are. But, thousands are going to be single family and, condos. So I'm excited, as we all should be, right? Because that's what we need. And then here's somebody putting his money where his mouth is.
Right.
And price point got right. Now, again, assuming the economy holds and inflation isn't crazy. So I'm excited by that. So we all should be excited about that.
I
We
agree.
need transactions and we need all the rest of that. Okay, so I just said inflation, I think. I think you touched on inflation a minute ago. Any thoughts, any concerns? I mean, where we are today, Russia's invading Ukraine. We've got a lot of stuff in the news. I'm hearing a lot of bad economic stuff, but then I have to pause and say, well, wait a minute. There's a lot of bad economic stuff in the news, the narrative, but the reality is the economy is still smoking. I mean, it's really, really good. So are there anything worrying you and the leadership at OCT, whether it's inflation or or just anything out on the horizon that you're keeping your eye on?
I think you hit on on it, and you were basically talking. It's more psyche.
Yep.
In that overall impact. I mean, clearly, while the economy is blazing, there are folks that are affected in a negative way.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate. And yet, as they have their challenges, but then psyche from what you hear on the news, what you read, what you're bombarded on your phone. If you're looking at your phone,
Yep.
Is the problem of inflation? Is the problem of the Ukraine situation? Is the problem of, and so they're building it up as if that's going to eventually lead to be a bigger problem.
Right.
So psyche is where we're concerned.
Right.
And again, we kind of sound consistent in terms of. We're trying to teach our leadership that we have to just bust through that,
right.
And do the best that you can. So it becomes kind of a numbers game to bust through that.
Yeah.
But that's concerning for sure.
Yeah, but you guys have been in business for how long?
We just celebrated our 48th year in
48th
business.
year.
Yeah.
And your father, John, he's the founding guy, right?
He is.
Yeah.
Yes.
We should get in him next year. We're gonna bring in John in here. We're gonna we'll do a threesome here.
That would be a great interview.
It would be, because
Yeah.
he's got more juice than both of us combined. I mean,
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Very high energy gentleman.
absolutely. I love your dad. I absolutely love your dad.
Thank you.
Okay, so 48 years.
Yes.
Okay, so you've seen a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen some good, you've seen some bad, you've ridden through some really bad. It is interesting, psyche, narrative, whatever we want to apply to it. But I guess I'm feeding my own narrative. I guess partially what concerns me is how quickly the psyche can change. It wasn't a month ago that, certainly 5-6 weeks ago, the entire psyche was focused on COVID and are we coming out of COVID? Are we in? Are we out? Where are we? And now, I mean, it's almost a footnote. We'll see what happens. I'm hearing other variants and whatever are potentially raising itself. But I mean, the Russia-Ukraine thing and inflation has completely overwhelmed
Yes, it has.
any psyche concerns that are out there with COVID. So I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to describe what's going on with inflation and with Russia and Ukraine as just kind of a shiny object. But it does seem as though Americans tend to be distracted by shiny objects fairly easily. Now, again, is COVID a shiny? Of course not. I don't mean to minimize any of that. But it is crazy how quickly our attention shifts from one thing to another thing, and how is that going to impact our relationships with our consumers in the real estate market. I will tell you, though, so far, with everything that's been going on, we still have just as many buyers that are in the marketplace as we have had.
Right.
It has not slowed down. The only thing that has slowed down is we just need more sellers.
Right.
We just need more sellers. So anyway, well, Mike, look at us. I think we got our first market forecast in the books.
I hope that. Appreciate it.
Any closing comments or thoughts or any predictions you want to make on 2022?
We just, interestingly enough, had a meeting today where we were talking about that amongst our managers. We're forecasting a strong year.
Yep.
We're forecasting demand to be there.
Yep.
We're looking at our opportunities and saying that it's everything is out there in front of us. So we're looking forward to what 2022 will bring to us. We're not trying to say there aren't cautions and we need to pay attention to them, but I don't really see anything on the horizon that would lead us to be concerned in that fashion at this
Right.
point in time. Definitely appreciate very much the opportunity to sit down and be a part of this.
Well, we're going to have to make you a regular staple speaker, or at least somebody. If not, by the way, I think it's you. We'll bring your dad in. He can sit next to you.
He could come in and we'll do it together.
Yeah, exactly. We probably have some fun with that.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you one thing to close, and it's not. I'm not closing on a positive just for the sake of positive. But one thing that we've seen internally, and it's very anecdotal. It's too early to draw conclusions, but we've started a relatively new marketing campaign directed towards sellers. Basically, hey, who's interested in knowing what their property value is worth? Thinking that in part that the narrative or the psyche is, hey, prices have done pretty well. Maybe now might be a good time to put our property on the market. Because
Right.
if any sellers are paying attention to what's going on out there, they've got to realize, oh my gosh, honey, look at our property values.
Sure.
I mean, we're up 40% in the last 2 years. And I'm not surprised, but I will tell you the level of inquiries that we are getting from potential future sellers is way higher than I expected. I mean, way higher. Now, maybe that's a sign of, hey, the market's just too hot, and the sellers say, I want to exit.
Right.
But even if they feel that way, the buyer demand is we'll gobble up every single one of those properties within a very short period of time. So hopefully those seller inquiries will turn into listings, which will turn into escrows, which will turn into title orders. Yeah, right? Isn't that how this whole thing works?
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would work. And then hey, we get to keep doing this. So
that would be
anyway,
wonderful.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on in.
Very much.
Okay, our 2022 real estate market forecast continues. Again, we got about 7 speakers left to go. Chris Thornburg is going to close us out on April 6th. I think I've been saying for the last couple of videos, watch for details on how we're going to deliver Chris. Which, by the way, getting back to you real quick, we're talking about how quick things change. We wanted to do this live.
Right.
Okay. It was just a couple of months ago that we were on the cusp of, are we going to do it live or are we going to be back in studio? So how quickly my psyche changed. We're doing live. Oh no, we can't. We've got the variant that we've got to do. So. At any rate, so it's crazy. So Chris is going to be virtual. So for those of you that are thinking we were going to try to do a live event, it's just too hard to get the venue. But April 6th, we'll do it live, but we'll do it in studio. We'll be broadcasting it virtually. So stay tuned for that. And Mike, once again, thank you so much.
Thank
All right,
you.
stay
Appreciate
tuned.
it.
More to come.